Hello, everyone, and welcome to SUGTalks, the official podcast of the UK and Ireland SAP User Group, a not-for-profit membership organisation designed to help you get the very best out of your SAP investments. Our focus is bringing the whole of the SAP community together so our members can learn, network and collaborate to improve their organisation and make their job easier, providing an independent channel through which to influence SAP. I'm Craig Dale, your host and Chief Executive of the User Group, and together with our special guests, we will take a deep dive into topics, challenges and opportunities facing SAP users today. Today, we thought it would be good to introduce you to three of our more recent board members discussing their career, SAP journey and involvement in UKISUG. All three joined our board in 2020, and as yet, we have yet to sit down at an in-person board meeting, with all three of our meetings from April last year taking place online due to COVID-19. And I'm delighted to be joined by Greg Turner, who's a business transformation leader, CIO and VP of technology, most recently at Burberry. Cheryl Millyard is Head of Business Service Centre at Gloucestershire County Council and has been with the council for over 28 years. Conor Reardon has been with Pfizer, a global pharmaceutical organisation, and is Director of Digital Finance Optimisation, again being at the organisation for over 14 years. So, welcome everyone. And before we start, I thought it would be good to get a little insight into you personally. So, a question for you to kick start with, and I'm going to start with Greg on this one. So, what are you currently either watching, listening to, or reading?
Oh, it's a good one. Well, I guess the first thing to say is I've got a lot of time on my hands with all these lockdowns and Christmas and everything else. So I've had a lot of time to do some reading. There's a few books that I've really enjoyed reading. I think the first one is the Mandy Hickson book, The Officer Not a Gentleman. So I actually read that over Christmas. Brilliant book, really inspirational, about sort of one person's fight to really follow their passions. So that's a good book for everyone to read. And one of my all-time favourites is The Phoenix Project. I've read that a few times, and every now and again I dust that off and reread it. But it sort of follows an IT organisation that are going through some transformational challenges. And it's quite focused, although they don't mention SAP, it's quite focused on sort of ERP and what organisations struggle to deliver. And it goes into a lot of information about the politics, the organisational setup, the way that the teams are working. And I think people, if they read it, will get a lot of parallels to their own organisations. But yeah, really interesting.
Oh, cool. Oh, thank you. I've made a note of that. I'll have a look at it. And certainly looking into the politics of things is something that rings true with us all at the moment, as you mentioned, going into yet another lockdown. Yeah. Cheryl?
Well, I haven't got much time on my hands because I'm still working full time, and it seems to be the days are longer than they ever were, and things are getting more frenetic than they ever were. I haven't actually been able to read a hard book for many years since my husband died, but I listened to a whole load of books on Audible. And so the one that I've listened to most recently is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, which is a book which is positioned in the war and focuses around radio waves and how important the introduction of radio was. And it shows you two people on either side, one from Germany and one from France, who lived in Paris, and they're quite young in the war. So that was quite an interesting story. And I think on telly, I tend to watch, television maybe half an hour each evening. And I did a bit of binge watching on Outlander recently. And then also over Christmas, binge watched The Queen's Gambit, which is the chess, which was absolutely superb. Fantastic. Yeah. And then I guess probably a more... It's got a real twist at the end. Definitely recommend that one.
Okay, what was that one again, Cheryl? Sorry.
The Undoing.
The Undoing, right? Okay. Oh, thank you. We look into that. And finally, Connor, what are you either watching, listening to, or reading at the moment?
Yeah, thanks, Craig. Yeah, so a bit like Cheryl there, the Queen's Gambit got me there. I binge watched it about 2 weeks ago. Really excellent series. I suppose from one I'm reading. I've just finished reading Brave in the Wilderness by Brené Brown, which is a really interesting read, and it's all about about belonging and the true belonging and how we're connected in terms of communities, organizations, and culture. And it's a really interesting read, and something that maybe that's relevant to maybe what we're talking about this morning. But the importance of organizations to people and that need to be connected. It really gave me an interesting insight even into team culture and supporting football teams, and the importance for people to be part of a tribe and be part of a group. And maybe in terms of what we're talking about this morning, in terms of the user group, that importance to being part of a group and how we connect and fit in and how that's important to people. It's a really interesting read to kind of get those insights into why groups, peoples, and communities are really important for people.
Oh, excellent. Brené Brown, wasn't it? That because
Brené Brown,
yeah, she's very good, very good.
excellent.
I like Cheryl. I do a lot of listening as well, and on my, if you like, lockdown walks, been listening to a fair few books, and Brené Brown, Dare to Lead was a very good one that I listened to. Well, thank you for that. As I said, a gentle intro, and as Connor said, we're moving on to the user group, and first of all, thank you all volunteering your very precious time in supporting and serving the user group as directors. And as I mentioned earlier, we get to sit down face to face in the same room at a board meeting, as we've done it over Teams and Zoom and various things over the past year. But one of the things I'd like to perhaps start on, and start with you, if I may, Cheryl, is how did you first get involved with UK and Ireland SAP User Group?
Well, we went live with SAP in 2007, and I was the program manager for the implementation. And at that time, local government had our own sort of independent group of users who got together sort of sporadically, but not perhaps as joined up or as professional as we would like to. So I think we were struggling to get people to chair the group. And the administration was a bit of a pain. And SAP did their best to help us, but we were sort of struggling a bit, I think, really. Whereas I sort of recognise the huge value and the potential of meeting and sharing local government experiences, what our challenges were, what our plans were. So I offered to chair the group. And I think it was our SAP account manager at the time who introduced me to you, Craig, and said, well, what do you think about the public sector group joining the UK and Ireland SAP user group? And I think you attended one of our meetings that I chaired. And I think we both saw, as a result of that, the mutual benefit that both the UK and Ireland SUGA and local government users could get. And I think we decided that we were going to start on a trial basis. And I'm not sure we ever had a review, because it just sort of took off from there, really, didn't it, Craig?
Yeah, I agree. I remember that meeting very well in coming down to talk to you all, and how perhaps we could help each other, if you like, going forward. And I think yes, it did. It went very positively, I think, after that, and the meetings grew and grew from there on. And it's a while ago now, and we're still here, and the public sector community is still there and engaging well. So thanks, Cheryl. So Greg, and your involvement.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I've been working with SAP in one way, shape or form now for about, I think, 20 years. It's kind of aging me. But it's only been sort of fairly recently that I got involved in the user group. I think I'd always been quite heavily involved in the SAP Fashion Council, which is something that SAP run for fashion customers. which is sort of quite strong, but it is very focused on fashion and retail. And what I noticed is that I wasn't really engaging with the wider SAP community outside of that group. And I attended the conference, I think it was 2018 now, with the user group in Birmingham. Seems like a distant memory.
Yeah.
But really, really enjoyed it. I enjoyed most of all meeting the other members, talking to them about what they were doing, and it really kind of spiraled from there. And then I started to really push my team into getting more involved in looking at the content, joining some of the sessions. And certainly in the last year, with a lot of stuff running remotely online, it's given members a really great opportunity to dip into specific bits of content. So it really sort of started with that conference a couple of years ago, got me inspired, and then sort of pushing my team at the time to get much more involved in the user group, seeing the benefits that it can bring.
Oh, great. And if I remember rightly, in the 2019 conference, you actually attended and spoke in one of our streams.
I did. I talked about our journey to S4.
Yeah, and that's one of the interesting things I've seen of my time at the user group is that cycle, if you like, where people get involved in the user group, they come as a member, they see things happening, and then they start, so that's taking that information in and gleaning it, and then giving back, coming speaking, coming volunteering, etc. And Connor, I've known you for a number of years as well through the user group. How did you get involved?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I probably had a double start on the user group. I started back in SAP in '98, just around the time of Y2K. And I was based in Ireland at the time. And Fiona Walsh from SAP set up an Ireland user group. And at the time, it was really interesting because it was Y2K, everybody was putting in SAP and nobody knew how to do it. So the first user group was really a support group because everybody was kind of asking questions like, what's a basis consultant? Like nobody knew what basis, nobody knew what transports were. And it was this mystique. So it really was kind of a self-help group. But that kind of was a very kind of informal group. And then in 2006, I moved to the UK. And when I moved over to the UK, I think in 2007, I came reconnected again with the SAP user group. And I suppose from there, we joined at a time we were called Wyatt. We're now Pfizer, but Wyatt joined as a member in 2007. And we've been with the user group, for the last 13 years. So for us, it's been a great journey. I moved back to Ireland in 2010. And then when I moved back, I became a member of the Ireland group with Philip and the team, in terms of driving that group. So it's been a really long and engaging journey for me.
Thank you. And yes, you mentioned how you got more involved in time with the Ireland Special Interest Group specifically.
Yeah, and I think for us, obviously in Ireland, it's a small community, but what's great is it's very tight knit. So we've got a lot of companies. We come together on a quarterly basis. We share our stories, but the main thing is the connection. People connected. We can talk about the projects we're working on. We can share ideas, and even between the meetings, we're emailing each other on a fairly regular basis, asking questions. What are you doing on this topic? What are you thinking on this topic? And really just kind of sharing ideas and getting direction.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, joined the board last year.
Yeah, so for me, that was a really exciting opportunity. Obviously, a bit like Greg, I've presented at a few conferences. I've hosted a couple of SIG meetings even in Ireland, and for me, it was kind of the next logical progression to try and get more involved. So, when the group approached me and we talked about it, for me, it was an easy decision. While it was daunting initially to join the board and trying to understand what the expectation was, it was also a very exciting opportunity. So one that I kind of grasped with both hands, and looking forward to our first face-to-face meeting maybe this year, if we can get over the
COVID. Me both. and Greg, so you progressed through there, like we said previously, from the attending, the speaking, and then putting yourself forward to join the board in the election at the beginning of 2020. What prompted that from your side?
A couple of reasons. I think one was a bit about giving back to the community. I feel, and I felt at the time, and I still feel now, that the best way to get things from SAP is to do it as a group. There is so much knowledge and information out there, but kind of trying to bring it all together in the board. That was one sort of motivation. A bit about giving back, bringing the community together, and thinking about some of the benefits that me and my organisation had got from being part of the user group. Was really keen to see it continue, and for me professionally and personally to grow as well. To be part of a board was also something that was really interesting for me.
Oh, that's good. So you mentioned there, obviously, some of the value that you and your organisation have had from that, and obviously your personal growth on that. Is there anything specific you can touch on in those areas?
Yeah, I mean, I think most recently, sort of some of the white papers that the board have worked on and had commissioned. So I'm thinking about things like the road to 2027. Many customers are on that journey to S4 in whatever shape or form that's going to take for them. But it gives some really great information, tips and hints for people on how to go about making that leap to S4. So I think we were very early on in those in that. That was something that we were very interested in. I think some of the hyperscaler work that the user group have talked about, that was very helpful for us on our journey to AWS at the time. So it's really about getting that information, sharing it within the organization and looking for ways to do things better, to learn from other members. And in some ways, I feel it also brings you slightly closer to SAP as an organization as well through your engagement with the user group. So those are some of the benefits that I think we've got. And then, I've talked about this before, but this whole concept of community, thinking about, we are stronger as a group, as a community than as an individual person or organization. So, being able to have that wider voice with SAP, I think has been quite impactful through the user group.
Okay. Thank you, Greg. And Cheryl, we talked about obviously the progression from, if you like, a separate public sector community, in you being very prevalent in bringing that into UKISUG, and then continuing with that chairing of that group, and then moving, putting yourself forward to the board as well. How has that progressed for you, and what values have you seen?
I think the chairing of the public sector special interest group has been easy, and sort of taking it in my stride. There's always things that we want to talk about, and there's always speakers that the team from UKISUG can organise and help us bring to the party. I think I was a bit more cautious though, Craig, if you remember, about hosting a work stream at the annual conference, because I wanted to make sure I did a really good job of it. And I think I ended up hosting a work stream that I knew very little about. It might even have been the ACS one. But I gained a huge amount of knowledge, and the speakers were absolutely brilliant. I learned stuff that I never expected to learn. I also increased my network. So hosting those work streams is really, really valuable. I mean, the conference itself is incredibly valuable. And I always come back with new ideas and new proposals and new suggestions. There's always value to be gained from it. I think in terms of my personal development, the user groups help me grow in confidence and knowledge and experience. Things like the training that you put on for the volunteers who speak at the conference, absolutely brilliant training that really helps you understand your strengths and your weaknesses in terms of presentation skills. But I think in terms of the value from the user group, one of the big things for me is that you see behind the scenes as to what happens in the user group. And I've been absolutely amazed by how the user group works behind the scenes and the work that it does for the whole community, for the group. So we've mentioned that the SAP High Road to 2027, There's the skills white paper, the work that you did on licensing when we had all that confusion and lack of clarity about the impact of any indirect licensing, which was really, really helpful. But one of the things that I think also you might not necessarily pick up from the user group because it's not necessarily directly SAP related, but I do think gives you an idea of how much the user group understands, supports and empathizes with its members is the mindfulness sessions that you organised recently. They were absolutely brilliant. So value both to the organisation and to me personally, Craig.
Oh, good. Thank you. And yeah, I think after yesterday evening's announcement of a further lockdown for about 6 weeks across England, Scotland, Wales, etc., Northern Ireland, those will become more and more prevalent for everybody going forward. And especially, what we see is those who have to homeschool and try to work at the same time. It's such a challenge for everybody going forward. Thank you, Cheryl. And we hope to continue to be able to provide that value and support for all of our members. And one of the key things I always look at is how can we be of more help? How can we help our members succeed? And these are just different areas outside of the SAP arena as well, and we will continue to do that with all of your support in bringing that to our members. So thank you. And Connor, just like to ask you a question. And what's been the highlight of your time with the user group to date?
Yeah, I suppose there've been a few. I mean, I've presented a few times at the annual conference, and I found that to be great. The conference itself is great, but I think when you become a participant, when you actually become an active participant to become a presenter, it's even better. It's you feel even more connected with it. And also, I found that when I presented at the conferences, the amount of connections I'd make afterwards with people reaching out, asking questions, wanting to get more insights, it really kind of helped me build a broader network of people across UK and Ireland, from I suppose from a business and from a knowledge perspective. So that for me was kind of key. Stepping forward and not just being an attendee, but actually being a presenter and sharing your story. And I suppose it's something I try and encourage anybody that can just to come and share their story, because I think even at the conferences it's nearly always the customer stories that can often be more interesting than the partner stories, because the partners, while they're very interesting, really we want to hear, okay, tell us the warts and all about your project. What were the highs, what were the lows? So being able to get up there and share that, I certainly find that to be a really valuable opportunity. And I think, as Cheryl said afterwards, earlier as well, I went over to do the speaker training last year as well in Birmingham, and I found that to be excellent. So again, great support for people that want to present at the conference, and again, a great education that one day. It's amazing when somebody videos you speaking, all the little flaws they can pick out, and all the little minor things you can do to correct yourself. So again, it's all part of the education and learning.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and that's what one of the key things that we find is our members want to hear from other members, and that I believe is crucial to it. Connor, completely agree with that. Greg, your highlight?
Yeah, I think it's similar to Connor's in a way. For me, the conference is always the highlight. Even this year, despite everything being online, it was still really, really valuable. I think for me, it's the community, it's the education. So how do we all educate ourselves about the SAP products, roadmaps to help us make the right decisions? So really, it's that education piece. And then secondly, but equally important, I would say it's the community and it's the networking. As Connor said, some of the networks and contacts that I made through presenting, our journey to S4 was brilliant, both from the partner side and also from other end users. At the end of the day, we don't know everything, and we might as well leverage the network and share stories and get best practice and tips. And it also helps us to keep our partners on their toes. It helps us to engage with SAP in the right way, and it just really creates a much better community. So I'd say those two things: it's education and the community piece that I've found have been the highlights for me.
Oh, thanks, Greg. Cheryl?
Difficult just to pick one highlight. I think one thing that stands out in my mind is the trust workshop that the user group organised with SAP back in October 2019, and that was a bit of a turning point for me, really. It was brilliantly facilitated, brilliantly organised, structured, open, honest, an opportunity for customers to talk to SAP and talk about their frustrations and their challenges and where they were going in the future, but also a real eye-opener in terms of looking through the vision and through the eyes of SAP and their perspective, and seeing how they saw things, and what problems they had, and how they could then best work with the user group. So that was certainly a real turning point for me. And I guess just generally, a general highlight is the value that public sector get from the user group, from being a group within a wider group with much more influence with SAP. And public sector has got much more prominence recently. We've got different pressures to private sector. Budgets and funding is always an issue, and procurement is much harder because we're spending public money. But there is that willingness and eagerness to share our experiences and our business cases and overcome challenges together. And we genuinely want to help each other. And the user group helps us and makes it much easier for us to do that and to create that community spirit within the user group, but also linking in the wider SAP group as well, and linking in with the SAP strategic direction. So those are the two I can think of, Craig.
Thank you very much. That's, the two, numerous things there that come to mind that, if you like, please me in a way, because I look at what the user group team are bringing forward, and it's really good to hear what the highlights are, what the valuable elements are, so that we can continue to do that. And it's one of the things that, when we're sending out our annual member survey, to ask our members, what is it that we can do better for you to help you succeed more in the future. And we're coming towards the end of the podcast now. So what I'd just like to do is ask you quick fire round very quickly. One top tip from each of you on why someone should engage with the user group. So start with you, Connor.
Yeah, I think the key thing for me in terms of engaging with the user group is building connections. So you get connected with people. You obviously get connected with the products, but the key thing is people. You will learn more from people that have done this before, end users, than you'll ever see on a podcast, or you'll ever see on a TED Talk or whatever. So, getting connected with people, making those connections, and then afterwards being able to follow up with them, ask them questions, is the most invaluable thing for me from the user group.
Thank you. Greg?
I'd say to stop being insular, to stop looking just at what you're doing within your organization. It's very easy for all of us when we're busy on projects to be very inwardly looking. So actually stop being insular, connecting with the wider user group and SAP and partners, and using the user group as a forum in which to do that. But to really to just look outside of your organization, look at different ways of doing it and learning from other people that have done it before.
Thank you. And Cheryl?
Well, I agree with what both Greg and Connor said, really. It's all about learning. There's the Learning Hub, which we can buy into at massively reduced price through the user group. The partner recommendations, so let's not forget the partners in this whole community that we have of SAP, and being able to go onto the user group site and have a look and see what reviews partners have had is really valuable. And then, as as Connor said, they're learning from others, both their challenges and the successes, so that you're not repeating their errors and you're building on their success is brilliant.
Thank you very much, and thank you all very much for taking the time to join me today. I really do appreciate it, and your insights into what it means to get engaged, to really drive that engagement and volunteer with the user group. And thank you for everything that you do for the user group and its members. It really is appreciated by everybody. So thank you for being today, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in to our podcast. If you haven't already listened to the other podcasts in our series, please download them and have a listen. Hopefully you'll find them very interesting. And for further details on how the user group can help you, some of the elements we've heard today, making connections, getting engaged with the wider SAP community, including SAP themselves and the partner community, and learning more of the world of SAP. And don't forget the value that speaking at our events can bring you, and the help and support we can provide you in that. So further information on that, please do visit the user group website at www.sapusers.org. And until the next time, thanks for listening, stay safe and well, and keep washing your hands.